Hey YouTube, how you doing? Kevin here. I just want to do a quick video on top ends. Working on my MX80. I'm in my spare room. You can see all the totes and everything else are just all Christmas stuff. So anyway, I'm in my spare room. I'm going to do a quick little video on this thing about top ends. And this one right here was particularly missing a piston. They brought it to the shop to have it looked at, and they told them it needed a top end. So, and a lot of people are like, what the hell is a top end? So I am going to share with you what a top end is. Top end is the piston, the cylinder, and the cylinder head. To, there's many little pieces in between there. But a lot of times we hear these terminologies and we freak out because that's expensive. Well, it's not all that bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about top ends and how to fix them, replace them, do whatever we gotta do. Some stuff is stained, yeah. So anyway, let's pause this for a quick second and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. So anyway, what we want to do is make sure your gasket surface is clean. That's just stained. I cleaned it up as best I could. There's like a little bit of silicone on there. What do you call it there? Scraped it down with a razor blade, got all the gasket out, and also did the same for the jug. And what I did was I put the new gasket on with a thin layer of silicone on here because there were some scratches on the outside, and I just wanted to make sure that gasket was 100% sealed. So a couple of things. Let's go over some tools that we're going to need for this. Is the pair of needle nose pliers for the wrist pin. You're going to need a torque wrench. And this is an older bike, so we don't have a manual on it. We don't know what the specs are. So I'm going to tell you what I did. Because when you're doing these, you want to torque the cylinder head, but how do you know what the torque is? Well, you measure the thickness of the stud. So this right here is a 7mm stud, basically 1/4 inch. So a 1/4 inch gets torqued down between 10 and 13 foot-pounds of torque. I went by the stud measurement on a stud guide. You can look that right up online, bolt torque and stuff like that for generic bolts. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to torque this thing down at 10 foot-pounds. The reason why you want to do that is so that the head and cylinder are seated properly. If they are not seated properly, you can end up burning out a head gasket or a cylinder gasket, and what that'll do is it'll suck air and burn up your cylinder. So a couple of other things real quick. The piston kit, when you get a piston kit, looks like this one right here. They don't come with the wrist pin bearing. They come with the wrist pin. Okay, I'm gonna pull this out. I'm gonna drop the pin out, but you gotta buy the if you don't have it, you need to buy that bearing right there separately. Oftentimes the piston kit does not come with that. It does come with a wrist pin. It comes with 2 rings, or however many rings your piston may take, and it comes with the clips to hold the pin in. Now, the reason why we need the needle nose is to put that clip right there into that groove right there, and each one takes 2 clips. So each piston takes 2 clips, 1 on each side, and that prevents this wrist pin from sliding out and gouging the cylinder and seizing up this motor or destroying the cylinder in general, and then you'll lose compression and you'll be back in the same spot. So a couple of preliminary inspections. This bike didn't have a piston in it when I got the bike. So what you're going to want to do, which I've already done, is take a look down inside here and make sure there is no debris in there. Make sure there's no clip, no broken parts, pieces. I don't know what happened with the piston. Judging from the cylinder, it was just burnt a hole in the top because there was no damage to the cylinder whatsoever. So it probably just burnt a hole in it or destroyed a ring, something on those lines. There's no cylinder, it's not burnt up or nothing like that. So we're going to actually reuse the cylinder that came off this bike and all those other parts except for the piston. So what I do is I installed the rings. I can't do it because I'm holding the camera. So anyway, there's a little pin. You can see it right there. And the piston rings are grooved to accommodate that. And then they offset. There's another one over there. There's also an expansion ring underneath the bottom piston. Okay. Then you have your two transfer ports right in the bottom here for the intake. So that's the intake side. Not all two-stroke pistons have that. This particular one has because of the length of the stroke, has them built in here. And then if you look on the top of the piston, it has an arrow. The arrow is always faced towards the exhaust side. So, or facing forward. So, transfer ports on the back, oftentimes they're not on there. Go by the arrow. Always go by the arrow. And if this was an oversized piston, it would say, like say it was 20 thousandths over, it would say 0.020 or something like that. 0.020. There we go. Or 30. It'd be 0.030. Is how it would read. So anyway, that's the piston. That's how we're going to install it. And now we don't want this piston to whack the what do you call it there? The studs. So what we're going to do, I'll put that down. I got a couple of pieces of shrink wrap tubing, which I do a lot of electrical work, so I keep a bunch of these. You can use anything, fuel line. You can use straws in this case. A couple of straws I'm sure would fit over that. They're so small, but I slide these over here like that, and that prevents the piston from whacking metal, bare metal. So first things first, we're going to take and install the piston onto this. So I'm going to basically give you a demonstration of what I do. We have this piston right here. I installed one clip on the far side. You want to make sure they fit into the grooves because you don't want this thing coming apart. Then we put it in the position it's going to go in. I'm going to set that down right there on that piece of cardboard. And then we have the bearing right here, the wrist pin bearing. We have the wrist pin. Okay. And then we have the clip and the what do you call it, the needle nose to install them, but we're not at that point yet. So first things first, we're going to grab our assembly lube. This is engine assembly lube, and I'm going to lube the bearing. Put that up. I'm doing this one-handed, so please bear with me. Don't be afraid to get the oil on it. You're going to want to smear that all over it. Make it nice and lubed. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as too much lube. Okay. Then you got your connecting rod right there. This bearing is actually going to fit right inside there. If I can do this one-handed. Just like that. Boom. Okay. Then I'm going to take the wrist pin. I already got the lube on my fingers. I'm just going to lube it like that. Just like that. And then I'm going to grab the piston and slide this on. So I'm going to put you down for a quick second. And I'm going to assemble this real quick, and then I'll put the clip in. Okay. So I installed the piston pin, the snap ring clip on both sides, and always double check that pin. Make sure those clips are in and they're solid. There's no up and down. This thing is in beautiful condition. Okay, so now we got that all taken care of. Now for the next step. So now that we've verified that both clips are in, the wrist pin is solid, it's got beautiful movement, there's no binding, no up and down motion, no left and right motion on it. It's in good shape. We want to line up the piston pins with the grooves, but we're going to do that after. We're going to lube that piston. We're going to lube those skirts and those rings with the assembly lube. So I'm going to get that all lubed up, and I'll hit play again. Okay, so here we go. We got the piston coated in some we call it the lube, and then we're going to get ready to slide the cylinder over the we call it the over the studs. So that'll be the next step. So for this part right here, I'm going to try to position you, so just bear with me here. Let's see, I got to get a new stand, because this is very difficult here. See if I can do it this way. I don't actually know how I'm going to do that. I'll get it into position, and then I'll grab the camera, and then I'll show you how it goes on. Okay, so I wanted to show you this. I forgot to tell you, I lubed the cylinder with the assembly lube before I slide the piston on, and at the bottom of the cylinder, they're tapered, so that the piston rings, once you line the rings into the pins I showed you earlier, that tapered part will catch the rings as long as it's lubricated and slide them right in. Now all you gotta do is, the gasket's already installed, just gently push it down, kind of massage it until it goes in nice and flat like that, until it sits flat. And that right there is how it's done. So then we take what do you call it there? We put the head gasket on, and then the cylinder head. Okay, so I got the head gasket, just a regular copper gasket with a crush spot on it. So we match that up how it fits on there. Be just like that. So it sits onto the cylinder. It's a little loose. That's how they always are, because the reason why it fits on there loose, don't be intimidated by that, is because the thread part is fatter than the stud part. That's just how they are. So it's one of those animals we're stuck with. Got the new plug and all that in there. And this right here just sits right on top of the cylinder like that. Boom. Get her done. Then you're going to have 4 flat washers on these ones right here. So slide those on there. Get that part on there. Like that. Then we have the 4 nuts. I like to put the spark plug in, and the reason why I put the spark plug in is for the simple reason is nothing can fall in that cylinder now. Why I'm going over with the nuts, because these cylinder fins are, you know, the coolant fins are high. You can see how high. I mean, my finger's in there, and you could easily drop one of these little 10mm nuts. Well, 10mm head bolts. They're 7mm, you know, stud nuts bolts. Stud nuts, 7mm nuts. And then there's that. So I'm going to set these in real quick, and then we'll torque them. It's nice when they run like that. I put a dab of oil, by the way, on the studs earlier when I took the whole thing apart, just to prep it. So the studs actually, you can just wind them right down in, doing them all by hand. So I'll be right back. I'll go get my socket. Okay, so basically just wind them down as far as you can, and then we're gonna torque these in a crisscross pattern. Starting with this one, this one, that one, just like you would a tire on a car. And we're gonna go to 10 foot-pounds on this thing. So this thing is measured in foot-pounds. If you can see it or not, this thing is not very clear. I apologize, but it's basically goes 0 to 15, and 10 is like right in the not in the middle, but yeah, let's see. This measures on 2s. Yeah, it's gonna go up to that line right there. So you go 5, 10, 15. So torque these down to 15 to 10. Now they're not torqued right yet. I'm just winding them down, because You want to crush that head gasket down evenly. A lot of times you just, you see guys just put a wrench on them and tighten them down. You want to even do this, even when you're winding them down, you want to do it evenly, because it's you're crushing down that head gasket. I still have some parts on order for this thing, so it's not going to be finished today, but the top end part of it will. Okay, yeah, let's get in there. Alright, well, since you can't see it, I'm going to go ahead and torque all these head bolts, and then I'll come back. Okay, so now all 4 bolts are torqued over, and I'm going to try turning over the engine. It's got plenty of assembly lube in there to be able to accommodate that, and I should feel some resistance, some compression. Oh yeah, wow, oh yeah, that sounds awesome. Beautiful. Okay, so when I get to the next part, I will do another video. I did the carb. The carb is cleaned. Hold on one second. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about the carburetor and the most likely problems with this bike it's had. One of the complaints with this bike was no compression, which he burnt it up, and he got the estimate. They told him it was going to cost to fix it, yada yada yada. I just did top end to it. So compression's back. This thing will run. I cleaned the points. I got spark. And then next thing you need is fuel, and fuel needs to be metered properly into the engine. And a couple of problems that this machine has is, one, this insulator, an insulting gasket they call it, has cracks in it, and we have another one of those coming. The problem he said that he had is fuel running out the front of this carburetor, and I checked the float adjustment, that was fine, and I checked the needle and seat, and that's where the problem was with this carburetor running out. On the tip of the needle right here, you can't see it because my camera sucks, but hold on one second, let me see if I can clarify this a little bit. Try that. Okay, well, no, it's not really working out too well. Well, anyway, on the tip of the needle and seat, this is the needle, that right there is the seat. There is a groove around that, and basically it wore into the seat. So I replaced that, and then I found another problem with this bike, and I'll show you what that was. I ordered like piece by piece on this carburetor. This carburetor is very rare, so you don't find too many of them. Okay, on the top of the slide, here's the needle, and the slide. This needle used to flop, it used to be able to push right up in there. That little clip you can see inside there looks like a part of the flux capacitor. See if I can get it. I can't really get a good focus. There we go. That clip was missing out of the carburetor, and it was causing the what do you call it there? The thing to what do you call it there? Float up, if you will. Now, some people leave these slides hooked up to the throttle cable, and that is not recommended, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when the bike is sitting and the stuff is slapping around on the bike, what happens is this needle can get destroyed, and it's a very fragile needle because it goes into the jet, into the main jet for the throttle, and when that happens, it can literally cause the thing to run rough, and it's premature wear. So the slide has a little bit of wear on it, but not enough to really worry about replacing it at the moment. I'm sure it'll run the bike just fine. Now we did the proper what do you call it there, proper fixes to the carburetor. So I'm waiting for one part to come in for the carb, and then we can mount that on. And we got the air induction tube, which basically hooks up to the carburetor and goes into the air filter assembly, which is right there. So that right there was missing. So we had the engine sucking in dirt, we had the needle floating, we had puking fuel out because of the needle and seat, which is why they pulled this tube off right here to find out what was going on. They couldn't fix it, which they lost basically everything for it. Yeah, they had some problems going on, and instead of doing research and fixing the problems, they decided to run it, and because it would run around the yard until it stopped puking fuel out, and that's just not a good way to run a bike, especially a nice one. So that's what we're at with this right now, waiting for some parts to come in. We got a couple of clamps, a special clamp that goes on the end of the, whatchamacallit there, on the end of this. So here's a spring clamp. It looks like a big long spring and hooks on together on the end and snaps onto it. And a regular type of style clamp goes on this end. I like using OEM parts if possible. And we're going to replace the insulting gasket on the end of the intake. And that's pretty much it for right now. And I got the new exhaust gasket right here. Okay, the new exhaust gasket. So when we put the exhaust back on, we can do that. But the exhaust is actually going to be the last to go back on. For the simple fact is, we want to make sure that we get everything on there tight and secure. So please subscribe if you have any questions about your top end. And the same thing goes for liquid cooled too. That's how you're going to do them. Liquid cooled and air cooled. The only difference is one is liquid cooled and the other one's air cooled. They go together the same way. Really just make sure you got your rings on properly, lined up with those little pins. Make sure that you got both wrist pin clips in. Make sure you lubricate your piston and wrist pin. And make sure you lubricate your cylinder. And everything is clean. New fresh gaskets. Sometimes when you pull the cylinder off, in fact this one was, when you pull the cylinder off, the gasket was stuck to the base of it. Just because the gasket is, solid, doesn't mean it's reusable. It's a good idea, if you're gonna go all the way. Replace the piston, replace the rings, replace the wrist pin. The wrist pin bearing does not necessarily come with the piston kit. Make sure you check that. It's always a good idea to change that because wrist pins wear differently. So a wrist pin could definitely, I would definitely replace that bearing. Always replace that bearing when you do a top end. And make sure you come with 2 clips for your wrist pin. Some pistons may be pressed together, but I haven't seen one on a 2-stroke. That's more of an automotive thing where they actually press them in. These right here normally slide in and out. And there's a little groove. Make sure that clip falls into that groove or you're going to blow this engine, straight out, right? So, by all means, if you have any questions, yes, but you can have that. 1 second. Yeah, so if you have any questions on your machine, please give me a message there and I'll respond to you as quick as possible. I check my YouTube every single day. So if there's some information I can give you to help, remember the arrow faces towards the exhaust. Match up your ports. Make sure everything looks good before you assemble it. And before you take the stuff out of the package, inspect it and make sure you have the right ones. Oftentimes when you're looking at a picture online, like they show you a piston, it's a generic picture. It's not necessarily the one that goes to your machine. That's their standard picture for all their stuff. So make sure you check that. Make sure you check, more information you have on what you're ordering, the better off you are. Protect the piston. Use your sleeves. Keep it on the studs. Don't be rough with it. It's a piston. It's gonna get enough beating from the explosion that happens in the chamber. No sense of adding to it. Scratches, scuffs, and all that right there can damage the cylinder wall and the piston. Arrow towards the front, and that's pretty much it. So hope you liked the video. Hopefully it helps you with your assembly. Remember, assembly lube is the best lube. I swear by this stuff. This is ultra slick right here. From what do you call it there? What was it? Permatex, yep. I use this stuff all the time. Forgot the name of it. Sorry about that. It's right on my face right there. Boom. That's the brand I use, and I've been using this brand for about 25 years. So I fall in love with it. I use it for everything. This is good for assembly lube is good if you have like something you need hold. This stuff is super tacky. Super tacky. I mean, you could, if you're gonna put an O-ring on something and it keeps falling down, you can use this right here instead of grease, and it's a lot better. So this stuff comes in handy for everything. Assembly lube when you're rebuilding carbs. If your slide is a little on the tight side, give it a little bit of that, and it'll move. So yeah, I mean, you can use it for pretty much anything. Holding clips into place, and then go ahead and doing your thing. You can use it for lubricating cables. I mean, stuff comes in handy. So many handy things for that. So yep, by all means, anything, any questions, please comment. As always, please subscribe, share my videos, and thank you for watching.